Detonation. As much as I would like to enter, I would like to first know why I am seeing offensive and restraint runes inside the spell formation. Not even one isolation energy rune is in the formation. Blue light flashed in Leyland's eyes as he stopped in front of the formation and looked at the Magus within the black fog. To think that you would still find out after all. The Magus in the dark fog smiled wryly, and his voice turned much gentler. It belonged to that of a young woman. Leyland actually recognized this voice. It can't be helped since I've never really swindled anyone before. The woman forced a laugh and dispelled the black fog that concealed her. The fog dispersed, revealing an ordinary female face. Though she wasn't that pretty, her eyes were extremely gentle, and there seemed to be ripples within them, making her unforgettable. On her chest was a large necklace of gems and pearls strung together, each sparkling with every color under the sun. Jenna, it's you. Leyland immediately recognized the identity of this Magus. This young lady was the first Magus that he had befriended in the Nightless City, and Leyland's impression of her at the time was not bad. However, it seemed like this pure-looking young lady was, in fact, hiding something from Leyland. We finally meet again, Leyland. This young lady, who seemed to come from a large family, smiled brilliantly. Let's not talk about the things of the past. Shouldn't you first explain the traps laid inside this spell formation? Leyland pointed at the spell formation with a solemn expression. He had been traveling in secret, and even though he had been on alert, he had been followed by this young woman in disguise and did not realize it at all. He had no clue as to what methods she had used to conceal her tracks and what intentions she harbored. Regarding this problem, Jenna lowered her head as if ashamed. This is. In a split second, a multicolored burst of light erupted from the necklace around Jenna's neck, rapidly approaching Leyland. Leyland, who had always been alert, had previously set up several spell formations on his legs to assist him in moving more quickly. They were quickly activated, and his body turned into several black shadows that instantly disappeared. Rumble, rainbow rays of light enveloped the ground and formed a rune on the floor. Under the light, all plants and even the soil began to wither. Gotcha! At this scene, a smile appeared on Jenna's face. Leyland, who was in the middle of moving, was shocked. At that moment, a dim spell formation suddenly appeared and lit up under his feet. Countless white pillars of light rose, forming a cage that locked Leyland up within. Did she plan ahead and set this up beforehand? No, it's something more powerful than that. Inside the cage, Leyland shook his robes, and several fireballs crashed into the cage, the black flames burning fiercely. However, these pillars of white light were extremely sturdy. The latent fireball could only cause the light pillars to tremble. It seemed like much more power was needed to break this spell formation. A person who was able to lay such a spell formation was not a simple character. Leyland carefully looked at this female Magus, suddenly feeling that he had underestimated her. No matter if it was that obvious spell formation trap that was laid as a bait to attract Leyland's attention, or grasping the right opportunity and making an instantaneous decision to strike, it was not something any ordinary light Magus could do. This particular prediction of where Leyland was going to land made Leyland even more afraid. If it was the power of divination, low-leveled magicians were helpless against it. Why? Leyland, who was trapped in the white pillared cage, asked. He'd only seen Jenna a few times before he entered the city. After that, they had limited contact, and no matter how he questioned himself, there wasn't a reason for them to be in a battle to the death. I'm sorry, but you are the catalyst that will bring war and draw fresh blood in the South Coast. To protect the peace here, I have no choice but to sacrifice you. Beads of tears dripped down her face. Leyland could not determine whether or not they were crocodile tears. So just because of some illusory prophecy, you want to get rid of me after thinking that I will bring danger to the South Coast? Leyland's face darkened. No matter who it was, after being confronted with such a ridiculous situation, they would also be driven mad. Leyland had thought of many situations earlier. Was it revenge? For the benefits of an opposing faction. However, he had never even thought of such a possibility being her motive. However, since it had already been confirmed, what Jenna had cast before was a type of prophecy spell. You don't need to struggle anymore. This is a cage that I prepared especially for you using fragments of the future that I obtained. Not only is it made entirely out of light elemental particles, I've also included innumerable high-level spells that are fire-resistant. Even with your most powerful attack, it's impossible to break out of there. Jenna suddenly closed her eyes and then quickly opened them, Her pupils were white. "For the sake of world peace, please leave this place," Jenna said indifferently, her originally common face unexpectedly radiating a holy feel. As the words left her mouth, the white pillared cage trapping Leyland began to close in. Countless white threads of light separated from the pillars and enveloped the interior of the cage. These white threads were like thin silk produced by silkworms, wrapping themselves around Leyland's body as if they wanted to wrap him in a large cocoon. Hee. Leyland paid no heed to the threads surrounding his body and suddenly began to chuckle. "What are you laughing about? If you have any last wishes, you can tell me. By my reputation as the guardian family, I promise I'll help you achieve it." Both of Jenna's arms were placed on her chest, and she made a strange gesture with her hands. "No need for it. Looking at your hypocrisy makes me want to puke." A nauseating feeling surged up from within Leyland's chest. Back in his previous world, he was already strongly disgusted by things such as world guardians, protectors of the peace, and the like. In the name of righteousness, these groups would sacrifice a person for the sake of the greater good. After having seen such a scene in the world he now lived in, an intense killing intent, something that he had never felt before, stirred within him. "There will be a day where the world will understand our methods, and world peace will reign forever." Jenna did not mind Leyland's words and instead replied with a maxim. She then pointed at the cage. "Purify!" TSSSSS. The white rays of light enveloped the entire cage, and Leyland suddenly felt as if he equals had been placed in a furnace. He had a strange feeling that he was going to be melted down. He specialized in dark elemental particles, which were the direct opposite of light elemental particles. He had no idea where Jenna had gotten this spell formation, but its might was incredibly formidable, and even Leyland wasn't able to endure the pain it caused. "I still have something to say." Despite the huge pressure on his body, streams of black smoke coiled around Leyland's body, which was resisting the corrosion of the white light. This scene made Leyland look quite pitiful. "Sinner. Speak your last words." Jenna advanced slowly. Leyland's lips moved slightly. "What, have the light elemental particles already corroded him to this extent?" Jenna got even closer and pressed her ear to the side of the white pillared cage. "You slut, you think that this world is operated by your family." In a moment, Leyland's body was covered by fine black scales and his eyes had an amber vertical pupil resting within. Leyland bellowed, "Hoop of imprisonment, detonate." Boom. In an instant, a brilliant silver light exploded from Leyland's arm. This metal hoop, which had been resting on Leyland's left arm, immediately exploded upon Leyland's command. The giant shockwave immediately caused part of the cage to burst open. The explosion did not stop there and even extended to where Jenna was. "Arg!" Jenna grabbed her face as she was sent flying backwards. The white thread, which had been restraining Leyland before, immediately exploded. Even the white pillared cage was clearly damaged. Eyes of petrification. Leyland's eyes were focused on the area where the cage was caved in. TSSSS. An ashen layer of stone began to spread on the white pillars. "Latent fireball." Leyland pressed both of his hands together, and large amounts of black flames emerged from the shadows. He pulled his palms apart. The black flames instantly separated and were evenly distributed on his palms. "Go!" Leyland clenched both hands and ferociously struck at the area of the cage that had been petrified. Rumble, the white light expanded, and in a moment reached the height of several dozen meters, as if wanting to break through the clouds. After which it withdrew and was engulfed by the black flames. As for the heart of the flames, a figure with tattered clothes and fine black scales walked out slowly from it. Host's body has suffered from light elemental corrosion. It has a restraining effect with the host's energy particles, creating a neutralizing effect. The damage has increased. Currently, 34% of the host's skin is burnt. The host's left arm has suffered from the explosion of a magic artifact, causing dysfunctionality. Immediate treatment recommended. The AI chip's prompt appeared in front of Leyland. His current condition wasn't all that good. Not only were there multiple burns all over his body, his left arm was slanted strangely in front of his chest, revealing a huge wound. One could even see slightly charred bone. Leyland had brazenly blown up a middle-grade magic artifact, and since he was in a cage, he was the one who had suffered the most. Hence, even with the fallen star pendant and Chemian scales, defensive properties increased to the maximum, he still suffered major injuries. "Necklace, no, that's impossible." Jenna, who had collapsed at the side, was holding onto half her face. Seeing Leyland escape, she shouted in disbelief. "How did you get out? In the future I saw, there wasn't anything like this." Jenna yelled, her facial muscles twitching slightly. "I know, it has to be. You must be the traitor going against fate." Jenna's register suddenly became extremely high. "Who I am is not important. The important thing is that you will have to die horribly today." The killing intent on Leyland grew stronger. Ever since he stepped on the path of a Magus, this was the first time he suffered such a big defeat. The injuries he sustained on his body and his left arm, which was on the verge of breaking, were not easy to treat. His upcoming mission in the secret plane had now become more precarious. At the thought, the fury in Leyland's heart became more vigorous. "Bitch, I want you to know the price of offending me." Leyland roared and used his right arm, the only one that was still in good condition, to viciously claw at Jenna. Streams of rope-like black smoke emerged from the ground, followed the ground, and climbed towards Jenna. "Guard!" Jenny grasped the large, thick necklace around her neck. A red gem brightened and a huge lava fireball generated in front of Jenna, rushing towards the black smoke. Boom. A huge energy wave was emitted, the scalding molten lava scattering in all directions, creating large black holes in the ground. "Even if you have all the spells prepared in that necklace today, it won't be able to save you." Leyland's eyes glinted coldly. Several black fireballs were shot out instantaneously and merged into the air as one collective fireball. The immense energy waves momentarily exploded with might, which reached 51 degrees that immediately burnt a huge pit in the ground. "Fireball," Leyland pointed at Jenna. The giant fireball seemed to set like the sun, projecting over Jenna's position. Before the black flames descended, more sweat trickled on Jenna's face, which was ever paler than before. "Frost!" Jenna gritted her teeth, spitting out a character of the Byron language from her mouth. At that moment, the necklace around her neck continuously emanated ice magic energy waves as it produced a series of white rays, while the pearls emitted light one after the other. The white rays formed a dozen huge ice shields in front of Jenna. The large, translucent white shields could clearly reflect the surroundings. The black fireballs from before flew down from the air, and in a flash, struck these ice shields. Water vapor was being emitted. A distance away from the fireballs, the water vapor quickly condensed into water droplets and ice chunks that fell to the ground. After everything had settled down, the frost shields that were in front of Jenna and the latent fireball had already disappeared without a trace. In the mist, a black figure appeared within. Leyland, whose body was lined with the fine scales of Kemian, immediately charged to where Jenna was. SSA. The layer of icy defense coming from Jenna's necklace was immediately crushed by Leyland's right hand. At the same time, he knocked Jenna away with his body. Pa! Leyland's shoulders crashed with a huge impact on Jenna. Kai Kai! A layer of milky white light appeared on Jenna's robes, enveloping her whole body. This was Jenna's innate defense spell. It had finally erupted at the most crucial moment. Pa! Jenna flew backwards like the head of a train that had left its tracks, bashing into many trees along the way. "This woman!" Leyland focused his attention on Jenna. After that exchange, he could tell that she was merely a newly advanced Magus. In terms of elemental essence conversion, she was far from his match. If not for having a powerful magic artifact in possession, as well as that incredible gift for divination, she would long since have died at Leyland's hands. As long as she was given time to set up formations, she could quickly come up with methods that were specifically catered to her enemy's weakness, like that incredible white pillared cage that had trapped him. Even a rank 1 Magus at his peak would be in trouble. Enemies with prophesying spells are the most troublesome. I was fortunate enough that her prophecy did not go as planned, but it's unlikely that I'll get so lucky again. Leyland's eyes turned cold as ice. The thought that there was an opponent that was operating behind the scenes with prophesying skills left a bad taste in his mouth. Having this happen once was one time too many. Never had his killing intent reached such an urgent degree. Shadow stealth. Leyland tenaciously glared at Jenna, who had crawled up. The scales on his body flickered and gradually became translucent, and he vanished into the air. He had decided to go all out when dealing with Jenna, and he made it his mission to ensure that this damned woman remained here forever. Seeing Leyland disappear into the air, Jenna's expression became even more serious. She currently felt Leyland's determination to kill her. She was born intelligent, and with her high-grade meditation technique and her strengthened sixth sense, Her instincts told her that if she made the slightest mistake, then she would be the one that died today. For the first time, such a terrifying experience had taken control of Jenna's spirit. Deep down in her heart, her willpower, which could not be shaken, had slowly given in. For the first time, Jenna felt that it was a very bad decision to come out here alone to assassinate Leyland. This fear and regret were like a poisonous snake which was continuously gnawing at her already weak mental fortitude. At this moment, a pink heart-shaped gem exploded inside Jenna's necklace. Jenna seemed perplexed at first, but very soon her will was strengthened. It's a hallucinatory spell with some psychological coercion. Jenna's face turned red. Despicable! Boom! A black figure appeared in front of Jenna. With his right hand clenched into a fist, Leyland struck the defensive membrane from Jenna's innate spell. This innate spell was not in its best condition from its previous consumption, and with Leyland's iron fist, it was shattered into countless white spots, dissipating into the air. Leyland's right hand was able to grab Jenna's right arm without any obstructions. Ka-cha! A bone-crunching sound was made, and Jenna's right arm had been torn off by Leyland. Arg! The muscles on Jenna's face contorted in pain. She clenched her teeth and the silk on her robe seemed to writhe with life, bandaging her wound quickly. At the same time, a large pushing force was emitted from her body, as if wanting to leave Leyland's attack area. Thinking of running, Leyland's pupils focused on Jenna. Eyes of petrification. Instantly, a mysterious light emitted from Leyland's amber eyes as he targeted Jenna. Petrification magic! Jenna made a sound of bewilderment. Petrification magic was something that had long since been extinct in the Magus world. Now, this was a spell that only creatures with ancient bloodlines had as an ability. Next, creaking sounds emitted from Jenna's body, as if her muscles had become stiff. A layer of stone began to spread from Jenna's face. Ka-cha, ka-cha. In front of Leyland, Jenna turned into an ashen stone sculpture. Ding! When the gray-white color had completely enveloped her, a light vibration came from the bulky necklace. The whole necklace floated in the air, where the faint voice of an old person sounded. Ultimate guard of life, activate! Light, dazzling light shone and enveloped the region in an instant. After Leyland opened his eyes, the stone statue in front of him had already crumbled. Jenna, who was within, had disappeared, leaving behind only a pile of petrified skin. After casting this final spell, that bulky necklace lost all of its powers. Ka-cha, ka-cha. A layer of petrified stone suddenly emerged on the surface of the necklace. The necklace had turned into stone, fallen to the ground, and shattered into pieces. This is a substitution spell. Leyland's expression turned even more solemn. This necklace contained so much power and even concealed a final body substitution spell. An extremely large organization must be behind Jenna. After realizing this situation, the killing intent in Leyland's heart grew even stronger. You won't be able to run from me. Leyland inhaled deeply, where blue light appeared in his eyes immediately and scanned the surroundings. Several dozen seconds later, Leyland's brows furrowed and hurried towards a certain direction. I have to hurry and leave. Jenna grabbed at the stub of her torn arm and rapidly traversed through the woods. The family heirloom necklace was destroyed, yet I wasn't able to get rid of him. Jenna was very dejected. The necklace from before was an heirloom, and for it to be destroyed while it was in her possession was a huge blow to her. Damned heretic, traitor of fate, there will come a day that I will punish you, Jenna pledged inwardly. Found it! Something that sounded like the devil's voice rang in her ear, and a vicious hot air brushed against her. Jenna quickly pounced to the side. Boom! A huge explosion sounded at the place she had been at, sections of the ground and plants flying everywhere. Meanwhile, Jenna suddenly smelt something very sweet, and immediately after, her entire body became numb and she collapsed to the ground, unable to move. This is the end. Leyland walked to Jenna, who had breathed in large amounts of chloroform and raised his right arm expressionlessly. You can't kill me. Do you know who I am? Jenna struggled, stuttering out her thoughts. Without waiting for Leyland to ask, she quickly answered, I am the successor of the Guardian family. I'm on good terms with the Light Magi domain and various large organizations. The moment you kill me, I don't care who you are. With his right hand armed with black flames, he clawed downwards. Curse ** boom. A green hurricane rapidly advanced towards Jenna and formed a green shield that protected her. Leyland's flaming right hand collided with the shield, producing a tremendous noise. Uncle Manla, she produced a wide smile. Along with the loud noise of the wind, a burly, blond man appeared in front of Leyland. Manla. Leyland recognized this Magus, who he had previously met once before. After receiving your transmission, I rushed over. Thank goodness I made it in time. Manla stood in front of Jenna, glaring menacingly at Leyland. You actually dared to harm my niece to this extent. My family will definitely not. Rumble. Before Manla could even finish his sentence, Leyland wasted no time and sent out numerous black fireballs towards him. From Leyland's perspective, since they were already enemies, it was natural for him to eradicate them all. Who would bother with listening to what they had to say? Be careful, Uncle Manla. He's very strong and his elemental essence conversion has surpassed 50%. While Jenna was yelling out warnings, Leyland was already manipulating latent fireballs to attack Manla's green hurricane. Under the attack of the fireballs, which had a might of 51 degrees, Manla was basically forced to retreat step by step. So powerful! An expression of shock appeared on Manla's face. Shortly after, like a ghost, Leyland suddenly appeared in front of him, a clawed hand encased in crimson flames grabbing towards his face. Pop! The sounds of bubbles being burst echoed, and the defensive spell on the surface of Manla's body was easily destroyed in the face of Leyland's crimson palm. It was taken care of so easily, like paper being ripped apart. Leyland's palm didn't stop moving and grabbed a hold of the burly man's chest. Slash. A bloody piece of flesh was ripped out by the dragging of the claw, and the surrounding skin was left slightly charred. This won't do. The difference in power is too much. If we stay here, we'll definitely die. Manla immediately pulled Jenna up, turned, and ran. Rationally speaking, Manla was a semi-converted Magus whose elemental essence conversion was at least 50%. In the Magus community on the south coast, he would be considered the cream of the crop. However, he had the misfortune of meeting an evildoer like Leyland, who was much too powerful even when his spiritual force and elemental essence conversion were being suppressed. In terms of hand-to-hand combat, Manla couldn't win either. Tiwus Feririan. The moment they started to escape, Manla threw out a silver magic scroll. 9 green tornadoes formed, and like a wall, they hindered Leyland from giving chase. You're thinking of running. Darkness flashed in Leyland's eyes, and after muttering a few incantations, he pointed forward with his right hand. Black fog immediately converged to become a black python, which headed for the two of them. This snake was like an illusion, passing through the green tornadoes. When it arrived in front of Manla, its crimson eyes were fixed on Jenna, and it bit towards her. What the hell is this? Manla produced another tornado. Hua La. The black snake ducked and passed through without trouble, and then opened its mouth, viciously biting Jenna's neck. 2 black pinholes instantly emerged on Yena's fair neck. They transformed to form a strange, twisted rune. Jenna! There was a white light surrounding Manla's hand as he tried to brush the snake away. However, with a swipe of the python's tail, it shifted and bit Manla's arm. The same rune was branded there as well. After these 2 attacks, the snake hissed and turned back into the black fog, which entered Manla and Jenna's bodies. This seems to be a curse. It's going to be troublesome. Manla's face fell. He couldn't feel anything different from the formation of the curse, but instincts told him that it was going to be inconvenient. Jenna, hold on. Manla yelled crazily, the green hurricane still spreading. His entire body seemed to turn into a gale and disappeared into the forest. Seeing Manla escape in that direction, Leyland did not move. His body seemed to have shattered like porcelain, with large volumes of blood suddenly gushing out. It seems like I can't endure it any longer. The injuries are too severe. Leyland was half kneeling on the floor. He suddenly became dizzy, and his vision began to blur. If possible, he obviously wanted to give chase and kill the 2 off. However, with his current physical condition, it was impossible for him to continue battling. However, the curse that I put up at the end. Hee. Cough, cough. Leyland laughed evilly but started to cough violently, spitting out large globs of black blood. Light elemental magi will always be the arch-enemies of dark elemental magi. Just a cage made of elemental particles was enough to reduce me to this state. Leyland laughed bitterly, and his figure quickly turned into black smoke, disappearing into the forest. Currently, he was in urgent need of a place to treat his injuries. Although he'd told George and the acolytes to wait for him, Leyland couldn't even take care of himself, much less the others, so that matter was naturally thrown to the back of his mind. After 10 or so hours, in a temporarily set-up tent. In the twilight, an oil lamp illuminated the area a dull yellow. Hay was spread across the floor, and Leyland sat atop of it. In his right hand was a test tube with a potion within, which he was constantly tilting towards the injuries on his left hand. This test tube was rather large, and in the translucent liquid, one could see something that looked like a baby's face. It was encased in the liquid and continuously let off little bubbles. TSSSSSS. After the potion was dripped into the wounds, large amounts of white gas were emitted, along with the sounds of corrosion. Ugh! An intense pain struck Leyland's nerves. He seemed to have been struck by lightning, his muscles involuntarily twitching. Leyland bit down hard, and large droplets of cold sweat dripped from his forehead. After that intense wave of pain, his wounds started to get numb. This numbing effect was very strong, feeling like tens of thousands of ants had crawled and gnawed on his bones. Leyland's pale face reddened as he sucked in sharply. At the same time, in the areas where Leyland's left arm was injured, various veins and muscles squirmed and began to regenerate. First, the fractures in the bone were completely healed, and the flesh and veins followed soon after. After a few minutes, Leyland tested out his left arm. At this point, the injuries on his left arm had been completely healed. Leyland's arm was slender and fair, but under that beautiful appearance, there were muscles that held much explosive power. It was impossible to tell that this arm had been on the verge of breaking off just minutes prior. Leyland tested out his left arm again with some actions and smiled in satisfaction. I'm lucky there was some liquid left over from the flourishing flower. If not, the injuries on this arm wouldn't have been able to be taken care of so easily. The flourishing flower was an important ingredient used by magi in operations to regenerate limbs. No matter what kind of injury it was, as long as there were enough flourishing flowers, it would be very likely that one could recover. The flourishing flower that Leyland was holding was something he had gained during his days as an acolyte. He had exchanged some of them in the Abyssal Bone Forest Academy for incomplete information about the branded swordsman. Excluding the injuries on his arm, Leyland had also used several potions to treat his wounds. He was now able to move freely and fight in less vigorous battles. I've mostly recovered. I guess it's time for me to go to the Marat Canyon. Leyland was a fairly cautious person. In the secret plane at the Eternal River Plains, it was dangerous beyond belief, to the point that even magi were considered fodder. As a spy from the 1,000 meddling hands, if he were ever to be discovered, he would be chased to the ends of the world. In this situation, if he were to sustain any injuries, Leyland knew that there was little chance of him surviving, much less being lucky enough to reap benefits. Leyland had already considered leaving and going somewhere else if his injuries couldn't be treated. After all, he still valued his own life over making profits. However, the situation was not so dire. Though he had made enemies with a possibly high-ranking Magus family with the abilities of divination, he didn't think much of it. I believe they aren't feeling very well right about now, yes. My curse won't be taken apart very easily. Leyland smirked icily. Though he had not been able to kill his opponents, he had successfully cursed Jenna and Manla with a spell that was unique to him. The formation of this curse originated from a curse in the great Magus Surhome's Book of Giant Serpent. Leyland had started the foundations of that curse and had made the appropriate changes to it. After adding in every method he could think of, the curse was so different from the original that even the great Magus Surhome would be unable to undo it. Like a password, it was complicated and difficult to make sense of. If one were not the original maker of the password, and instead tried to use brute force to get through, the object protected by the password would be destroyed. Jenna and Manla seemed to have high standings within their family, and most likely wouldn't be given up on so easily. Leyland's next task was to use the power of the curse to find out who his enemies were. As he had been followed and almost killed on the basis of some useless prediction, Leyland was quite annoyed. However, there was still a family backing them, and he did not want to shed all sense of cordiality without making sense of the situation before him. This was why Leyland had chosen not to chase them and had instead placed a mark on both of them. Marat Canyon was located at the end of Poem Alley. It was a barren canyon where the area and economy were both destitute. Apart from several wretched people who lived here in extreme poverty, no other humans would bother with a place like this, however. After the discovery that there was an entrance to a secret plane in this area, everything changed. Ever since one of the entrances to the Eternal River Plains, secret plane was discovered here, magi from every corner began to fight each other over the area. Eventually, the hunting and battle teams from Four Seasons Garden, with the aid of the White Magi domain, managed to repel the Dark Magi forces and claim this land as theirs. Soon after this, unaffiliated Magi and Acolytes set up a market for magic items in the surroundings. Four Seasons Garden's higher-ups were well aware this place wasn't well developed and dispatched people here. They treated this Magus market as the center of their power and created a little town, welcoming all non-dark Magi. The first impression Leyland had when walking in this small town was that it had a lively atmosphere. Looking for members, all of us are level 3 acolytes. We have a healer. The latest map of the secret plane for only 500 magic crystals. Walking dragon flower. Walking dragon flower that's freshly plucked from the Eternal River Plain's secret plane for 6,000 magic crystals. This is a discounted rate. I am looking for a group to join. I'm a level 3 acolyte and have both offensive and defensive skills. I also know 3 healing rank 0 spells. From the entrance of the little town, various stall keepers, adventurers, and official magi were crowded together, constantly arguing over prices till they were red in the face. Everyone was at least an acolyte. There were no regular humans. The whole town was like a busy food market. After much effort, Leyland arrived at Four Seasons Garden's administrative area, which was located in the middle of the town. Compared to the chaos outside, it was much quieter inside the administrative area, which had the battle and hunting teams guarding the area. Leyland couldn't help but think about the 2 official magi he had seen at the entrance to the administration area. Getting 2 official magi to stand guard obviously caused the magi and acolytes who came here to feel immense pressure. Numerous magi were chattering amongst themselves quietly as they walked by Leyland. All of them looked to be in a hurry. "Welcome. May I know if you're here to do the entrance procedures? Please provide evidence that you aren't a dark magus, and then present 500 magic crystals. You will then have a one-time opportunity to enter." Leyland came to a counter, and as soon as the personnel saw him, he quickly spoke very formally, as if he were selling tickets. In reality, Four Seasons Garden's higher-ups had actually capitalized on the opportunity to enter the secret plane by selling entry permits. "I'm not a magus from anywhere else. I belong to Four Seasons Garden's potioneering team and have been transferred here." Leyland placed his token of identification on the counter. "Ah, my apologies, Lord Leyland." The personnel took a look at the symbol and name on the token and bowed. "No worries." Leyland looked at the several counters that had a long queue behind them and asked indifferently, "Have there been many magicians going in recently?" "A large amount have come. Once we had allowed non-affiliated magicians to enter, the magi and acolytes who came forth to register had filled up this area. We even had to request for several of the hunting team magi to maintain order." The staff smiled wryly. Leyland was aware of this policy. Before he came here, he had taken a tour around the town and gathered information. Though Four Seasons Garden had taken over this entrance, the amount of magicians who came here was no small number. If they kept hogging the entrance, it was sure to trigger someone's dissatisfaction. It wasn't much if it was just acolytes, but when there were wandering official magi involved, the situation wasn't as easy to deal with. If there were dark magi purposely inciting conflict, then this caused a catastrophe. Hence, the light magi factions made a temporary agreement to become allies. They decided to open the entrance up to the public. All entrances that were controlled by light magi had rules. Other than dark magi, as long as one paid up 500 magic crystals, one would have the right to enter the secret plane. In addition to this, there was the condition that acolytes had to give up 50% of their earnings within the secret plane to the light magi powers guarding the entrance. Even official magi would have a portion of their profits taken away. Even with these fees, magicians still flocked here. They unceasingly entered the secret plane and explored the areas without fear of death. There were some with good luck that managed to survive and leave the area with large amounts of resources. This attracted more acolytes to enter and risk their lives in the plane. While these free laborers were dying by the dozen, Four Seasons Garden was hiding in the shadows and stealing portions of their profits. They were earning a fortune from this, and on top of that, through coercion and purchases, they now had a map of almost 1,000,000 mu of the plane and received precious information firsthand. To large light magi organizations like the Four Seasons Garden, the resources that were currently inside the secret plane was just a small reward. What they really hankered after was the continuous production of resources that the secret plane could provide. Hence, with the resources as the bait, large organizations such as the Four Seasons Garden were able to attract many magicians with no affiliation to risk their lives and enter the secret plane for the resources. In exchange, they would be able to obtain more information regarding the topography and ecosystem within the secret plane. As for the unaffiliated magicians, even if they were aware of the manipulations and hidden agendas behind the entrance fees, as long as they walked the path of a Magus, they had no choice but to enter this profitable scheme that the white magi had established. As the saying goes, as one is willing to be hit, one is willing to beat. Even Leyland had no choice but to approve the deviousness of this shrewd plan. I have 2 Grand Knight servants with me. They left for this place before me. Have they arrived yet? Leyland asked. Please wait a minute, I'll check for you. The staff hurriedly flipped through the thick book of records and accounting. I found it. It's only yesterday that your 2 Grand Knight servants brought your mount and luggage here. Also, after showing us your identification token, they were allocated to District D9, number 23. The staff member bowed. I will report your arrival as soon as I can. Regarding your task allocation, someone else will contact and inform you in detail. Great. Leyland nodded his head. After leaving a secret imprint with the staff as a proof of his arrival, he left the great hall through the back door. Behind the administration area was rows of orderly wooden houses. These houses were modeled simply, and the edges were rather rough. They looked as if their construction had been rushed. Within these wooden houses, one could occasionally see a few magi and acolytes wearing Four Seasons garden accessories. In the middle of these buildings, a huge platinum gate that was tens of meters tall was standing tall proudly like a mountain. It stood tall there like an ancient existence. On the gate were numerous runes connected together. They seemed to be alive and kept wriggling on the gate frame. Just the aura from the gate to the secret plane made it difficult for Leyland to breathe. Is this the entrance to the Eternal River Plain's secret plane? Leyland raised his head and surveyed this gate that seemed to be rising into the heavens, eyes full of unspeakable awe. The preciousness of a secret plane could be told from its entrance. Entrances to secrets planes comparable to that of the spirit-slaying sex plane could be easily destroyed by Leyland. The Gargimel that was as strong as a rank 2 Magus even had the terrifying power to break out of such planes. However, if it were here, that Gargimel might not be able to even create a crack in the gate to the Eternal River Plain's secret plane. With an area of more than 10 million mu, its internal structure and defenses had to be unimaginably strong. Even if rank 2 or 3 magi were to battle fiercely, the secret plane would be unaffected. Leyland guessed that even a rank 4 Morningstar Magus would have a hard time trying to destroy this platinum gate. Such a secret plane could be said to be a continental treasure. It was something that could help large organizations progress rapidly or aid someone in taking over the world. After actually seeing Eternal River Plain's secret plane, Leyland finally understood how it could attract magi from all over the south coast and even cause a Magus war. Unfortunately, no magi organization in the south coast is confident that it can take over the whole plane. As such, the plane has to be divided. Leyland sighed and turned his attention to the bottom of the large gate. At the lower part of the large platinum gate, 20 or so magi wearing Four Seasons garden attire were patrolling the area like soldiers. From these magi, strong undulations from powerful elemental essence conversions of at least 50% were purposefully released. Their bloodlust was also very obvious. It was apparent they weren't idiots who were taking the resources based on luck, but were actually seasoned magi warriors. Blue light flashed in Leyland's eyes, and the AI chip immediately scanned the several spell formations that were laid around the entrance of the secret plane. There were some defensive formations, while others were for detecting intruders. With such tight security, even if it was Leyland who were to try infiltrate inside, he would only end up dying. What's displayed might just be on the superficial level. There would at least be a rank 2 Magus holding fort around here. Even outside Four Seasons Garden's secret plane, there was a rank 2 Magus standing guard outside. Leyland did not think when it came to the Eternal River Plain's secret plane, the Four Seasons Garden would be reluctant to send a rank 2 Magus as the guardian. Aloran Leyland quickly looked at the faces of these magi. He remembered each and every magi that he'd seen at the Four Seasons Garden's headquarters before, but he did not recognize any of the people he saw here. There could only be one reason why these faces were unfamiliar. They must have been the hidden forces of the Four Seasons Garden, and usually did not show their faces. From the looks of it, the Four Seasons Garden had taken out all of their trump cards to keep control of the entrance to the secret plane. Caesar, the three-eyed Magus who was the leader of the hunting team, wasn't here either. If he wasn't hidden somewhere, he must have been on some special mission. Leyland felt his heart sink, as he was on an undercover mission as a spy for the 1,000 meddling hands. It seemed that it was going to be difficult to complete his mission. Leyland recorded this scene with the AI chip and followed the signs along the road to find his accommodations. "Master!" Leyland approached the wooden house that was in District D9. As they could sense Leyland, the Grand Knights, number 2 and number 3, immediately rushed out of the house and knelt on one knee to greet him. Behind the wooden house, within a fence, the venom wyvern hawk had drowsily lifted its head and made a noise of excitement. Leyland looked over his subordinates that he had remodeled and suddenly regretted having asked them to leave first. If he hadn't, with the abilities of these two branded swordsmen, he wouldn't have to be reduced to that miserable state and be so seriously injured. It's important that I find an opportunity and test out the battle abilities and power of the branded swordsmen. Leyland glanced at number 2 and number 3, who were kneeling respectfully, and rubbed his chin. The Four Seasons Garden worked very quickly, and during the evening, a worker in something similar to a suit knocked on the door of Leyland's house. "Lord Leyland, in the name of the Four Seasons Garden, the elders request that you head for the secret plane tomorrow. You will be taking over Zone 13. This person was also an official Magus. He spoke very slowly, with clear pronunciation. After reading, he passed a piece of parchment that had been stamped to Leyland. Leyland raised his arms and took it. The transfer order was on a stack of rather thick, dull yellow pieces of paper that gave a very firm feeling. The contents of the order were just as the man had said, and on the bottom of the stack of parchments, there was a stamp that belonged to the Four Seasons Garden, along with a few signatures. Leyland's fingers brushed over the stamp. SSC. 4 rays of light emerged from the stamp and danced atop the parchment, gradually forming a 4-colored ring that was unceasingly turning. After a few moments, the light died down. This proved that the signatures and stamp were all real. Leyland became quiet. "Aren't potion masters being called here to take over the roles of healers? Nobody told me I'd be on the front lines." Even if one didn't have a brain, it would be obvious to them that this was Caesar's work. Leyland still showed his annoyance and anger. "I am a potion master, not a fighter. You can't put me on the same level as those magi with blood staining their hands. I protest." "I'm sorry, but this was a decision from the higher-ups in the Four Seasons Garden. If you have any problems, you can report to the elders within 24 hours. However, as long as the elders do not issue new orders to make your current orders void, you will still need to rush to Zone 13 by tomorrow. If not, you will be labeled as a traitor and punished accordingly." This man said everything matter-of-factly, not caring in the least about Leyland's opinions. He then gave an elegant bow. "If there's nothing else, I shall take my leave now, Mr. Leyland." Pack. After the main door closed, the furious expression Leyland had on instantly disappeared. Instead, Leyland looked as if he was deep in thought. Ever since he had arrived here, he had been prepared for people to make trouble for him and treat him badly. All of that talk was just a front. The reason was that if a potion master were to be sent to the front lines and took the news calmly, it would seem too suspicious. "But if time is so tight, I need to start with all my preparation now." Leyland lowered his head in thought, his eyes sparkling with a faint darkness. The huge platinum metal gate was, as always, standing tall. Only until Leyland actually stood in front of it did he feel that all that he had seen in the past amounted to nothing in front of this majestic gate. Now that he was so close to it, Leyland was in awe. From the gate to the secret plane, he could feel a trace of some ancient aura. What shocked him, even more, was that spiritual force was faintly emanating from the entire gate. This spiritual force did not belong to any Magus, but instead originated from the gate. It's a living being and has its own spiritual waves. Perhaps, after a period of time, it can cultivate an intelligence of its own and become a genuine living creature. Leyland sighed in admiration and looked around the area. Though it was early in the morning, many magi and acolytes were queuing in front of the gate with tickets in their hands. As there were tens of powerful magi all around, it was rather orderly. As an internal member of the Four Seasons Garden, he naturally didn't need to queue up, and instead stood together with a few magi at the optimal location right in front of the gate. Number 2 and number 3 were carrying large bags and quietly following behind Leyland. It's 8 a.m. Open. Leyland looked at the hour hand of his pocket watch, which was now pointing to the number 8. The consumption of energy needed in opening the entrance to such a large-scale secret plane was immense. Even the Four Seasons Garden would feel pain at this cost. Hence, the Eternal River Plains, secret plains entrance would only be opened once a day at this time. With the loud order, a dozen magi who had achieved 50% elemental essence conversion placed their palms against the frame of the gate. Wang wang. A violent distortion of space rapidly formed in the middle of the gate and expanded. Creak. The gate opened a little and all of a sudden, light. Numerous rays of white light leaked out, swallowing all magi and acolytes in front of it. All Leyland could see was the blinding brightness in front of him, and his head spun from giddiness. After he regained his composure, he was already on top of a large white square in the Eternal River Plains, secret plane. Ha! Leyland breathed in deeply. The first impression he had of the secret plane was that there was an extraordinarily dense amount of elemental particles in the air. Calculated density of energy in surroundings, found to be 371% of that in external world. The AI chip projected its findings to Leyland. There is such a concentrated amount of energy, and on top of that there's so much land. For Magi, this is basically heaven. Leyland was astonished as he spoke. Listen up. I'll only say this once. After the Magi and acolytes present familiarized themselves with their surroundings, a bald, brawny man who seemed to be in charge came on stage. He was donning the attire that the Four Seasons Gardens Magi wore. His voice was loud and resonant, echoing within the plaza. Attention to all Magi and acolytes who are not affiliated with the Four Seasons Garden. From now on, you are free to move about in the secret plane. As long as they have no markings of the Light Magi Alliance, all obtained items will belong to yourselves. Also, when you wish to leave the plane, please return to this place. Remember, do not attempt to conceal your earnings. The moment you are found out to have been doing this, you will regret having been born. The brawny man was very direct, but the discontent of the masses quickly died down with the appearance of a row of official magi behind him acting like guards. After the bald, brawny man announced that they were free to go, the magi and acolytes cheered and rushed in all directions like wild horses let out of cages. In a few moments, they were gone. All right, you are magi from the Four Seasons Garden, yes? Come with me. The brawny man turned his attention to Leyland's side, and his tone and facial expression became much friendlier. My name is Dolorin, and I am the vice team leader of the Four Seasons Gardens defense team. If you have any questions, feel free to approach me. It was evident that this man treated those in the same organization as himself a lot better. I would like to know, is allowing these external magicians so much freedom actually a good thing? What I'm trying to say is, aren't you afraid that they'll stay longer in the secret plane or sneak out through other entrances? A petite female Magus inquired. Hee. The Eternal River Plains secret plane is very large, and there is danger everywhere. No Magus can stay here alone for too long unless he or she wishes to die in strange and mysterious ways, or become the excrement of high-energy creatures. The brawny man obviously disapproved, a look of fear flashing across his face. As for your question about leaving, within 1 million mu, there is only one entrance, which belongs to us. If they wish to travel to other entrances, they would need to go through exceedingly dangerous areas. Some of them are regions that basically require miracles for even official magi to pass through due to the minuscule chance of survival. Also, our Light Magi Alliance have all standardized the fees and set up stringent probing methods. This will not give them the chance to smuggle away their gains. To go through such a difficult path and take such a big risk has no meaning basically, unless they wish to defect to the Dark Magi. However, I imagine the Dark Magi are keener on robbing them of all their gains, and then flaying their skin and breaking their bones to use them as ingredients. Dolorin shrugged his shoulders a couple times, emphasizing his words with his facial expression. Magus Guard Zone 13, you're really lucky. Leyland was brought to an office-like room in a castle. After Dolorin assigned locations to the few magi who were queued up in front of Leyland, he opened Leyland's transfer order. Suddenly, Dolorin let off a surprised squeal. At the same time, he looked at Leyland as if he was cherishing a dear animal. Although you are a potions master, you were assigned to that place. Kiddo, did you offend someone? Leyland could only smile wryly in reply. All right. As long as the order is correct, I won't ask anymore. Take this, it's a map. Dolorin slipped a piece of parchment paper to Leyland. Zone 13 is at the border between us and the Dark Magi powers. Your mission is to protect the Black Mandara flowers there, and if the Dark Magi attack, you are to give a distress call through the signal tower. That's all. Leyland was then sent out of Dolorin's office like he was the plague. Leyland could do nothing but roll his eyes at this situation. With Leyland's speed, even taking into account the burdens that were number 2 and number 3, they hurried and reached Zone 13 before dusk. This area was a small highland and a fort that had been temporarily constructed using an earth elemental spell surrounded the Black Mandara flowers. After Leyland provided proof of his identity, he met with the person who had previously been in charge of the area. It was a tall and slender male Magus. The signal tower is in the middle of the fort, and your room is beside it. I'm leaving all these items with you. Also, there were some acolytes who had been dispatched here recently. I'll leave them in your care as well. The tall and skinny Magus hurriedly handed over the information, and after obtaining Leyland's signature, he rapidly left the room as if he was escaping. This speed left Leyland rather agape. All right, I seem to have got myself into some serious trouble now. Leyland flipped open the map. On the map that Dolorin handed him, the highlands of Zone 13 that he had been assigned to were like an eyesore, smack dab in the middle of the Dark Magi domain. Since he was surrounded on all sides by the Dark Magi powers, there was a high chance of him perishing in that place. As for the forces that Leyland had, it was merely a few acolytes. Perhaps he would even have to include himself, an official Magus, as a fighting force. In front of enemies, this trivial bit of power would only be able to warn and call for help. No matter what, I still have to take a look at my subordinates. Leyland came to the middle of the hall in the castle and gave a command for everyone to gather. I am the new Magus Guard. All acolytes who hear my voice are to assemble at the hall immediately. Leyland's voice wasn't loud, but it somehow traveled to every corner of the castle. A moment later, hurried footsteps were heard, and about 10 acolytes jogged into the hall. These acolytes' attires were messy. Though they all donned the gray robes that signified that they were acolytes, the symbol of their academy and decorative motifs were all different, indicating they were the inferior acolytes that had been left behind by various academies. The acolytes gave off energy waves that showed they were around level 2 or 3. Upon seeing Leyland, they all bowed in greeting, though they looked quite bewildered. Leyland patted his head. That Magus from before had left too eagerly and hadn't even bothered handing over his role to Leyland in front of everyone in the fort. However, it was a fact that the slender Magus had transferred his symbol of authority to him. Leyland withdrew a black scepter from his sleeves, following which, various colored defensive runes formed a spell formation within the large hall. The scepter that he was holding onto was the device to control the defensive spell formations within the castle and was showed that he was the Magus leader. After seeing the black scepter, the acolytes present understood the reason for his presence. We greet the Lord Magus Guard. And I'm Leyland. You tell me now, is everyone present? Leyland pointed at an old geezer acolyte. Rep, reporting to my lord. Apart for a few acolytes who have been delayed, the acolytes in this castle are all here. The old geezer cowered as he reported to Leyland. Just at this moment, several acolytes appeared at the entrance of the large hall with fear evident on their faces. What followed was a rather youthful and apprehensive voice. Lord, we are the new acolytes that were dispatched here. Our sincerest apologies that due to a previous patrolling mission, we had been delayed. May we seek your permission to enter? Even here, with Leyland's position as a Magus, he had much power over these acolytes. Not only could he issue missions as he pleased, he could even sentence these acolytes to death if he wanted to just by saying they had disobeyed orders. After all, this was a time of war, and they were at the front lines. Leyland had these acolytes' lives in his hands, and this caused the few new acolytes to be extremely fearful. After hearing this voice, Leyland's face revealed an expression of astonishment. Come in, he murmured lowly. Immediately after, 3 male and 2 female acolytes entered the hall, still cowering in fear. The acolyte standing at the front had a head of brilliant blonde hair, thick eyebrows and big eyes, and behind him was a female acolyte with a large bow on her back. They looked to be a couple. He trembled a little, but he clenched his jaw and knelt. My lord, we had no intentions of being late, but they purposely gave us difficult missions to complete. Utter rubbish. At this moment, the old geezer, who seemed like a cat that had its tail stepped on, jumped forward. The missions were all chosen by the bottle of Famedor. How could there be a problem with it? It's obviously you guys who do not respect our new lord. Looking at this scene, Leyland immediately understood the issue. It seemed that no matter where it was a tradition for the older guys to bully the newcomers. That's enough. He spoke softly with a gruff tone. The acolytes present all coward in fear. The wrath of an official Magus was never a good thing to being about. This voice. While most of the acolytes were ducking their heads in fear, there were a few contrasting voices ringing out. They came from the acolytes who had just entered while keeping their heads bowed. Leyland. George opened his eyes wide and looked at Leyland, who was up on the platform. He was gaping, his mouth opened so wide that he was like a huge toad. The others, who were making sounds of alarm, also included Shara and Besita. Leyland scratched his nose. Though he knew that these 3 acolytes had been allocated to the secret plane to stand guard, he never expected that there would be such a coincidence that they would be under him. My apologies, my lord. Although you told us to wait for you, after waiting for 2 days and 1 night, there were no signs of you, my lord. Also, as the time limit for the mission was approaching, we had no choice but to leave. Shara kowtowed, her forehead pressed against the icy cold floor as she did her best to explain. Leyland nodded his head. He remembered that he had mentioned it before. However, after the battle with Jenna, he had been severely injured and immediately needed a place to recuperate. Where could he have found the time to bother with them? After that, he had already forgotten about George and his party. I don't blame you for this. Previously, I had an urgent matter to attend to, which took up much of my time. Leyland explained. Peng, peng, peng. At this moment, the old geezer acolyte who had jumped forward realized that George and his party were not nobodies who could be picked on. On the contrary, they were backed by an official Magus. He felt as if his soul was wrenched out of his body. Quickly kneeling on the floor, he kowtowed until fresh blood appeared on his forehead. Lo, Lord, please forgive me. The old geezer felt exceptional fear. As an official Magus, Leyland had many methods to make him die a horrible death. Furthermore, conflicts such as these were like child's play in front of an official Magus. He couldn't hope to conceal this conflict. With Shara's constant tugging at him, George finally got himself together. As he looked up at his good friend, who seemed to be so far away from him, his expression was complicated. They were once good friends, but Leyland had surpassed George by such a huge margin that the old man, who was usually hard to deal with, was kowtowing and begging his pardon. This was a complex feeling that was difficult to make sense of in a short period of time. George's head was spinning. Although Shara had told him about Leyland after he woke up, seeing the truth of Leyland's real identity for himself was much different from just hearing about it from others. However, George was well aware that he could not maintain the relationship he had with Leyland in the past. It would only be possible if he advanced and became an official Magus, and Leyland did not increase his power and stayed at his current position. But how was that possible? George looked at the dashing young man with jet black hair. Leyland is only 20 now, right? To actually advance successfully at this age indicates that he has a talent that I can never catch up to. In comparison to George and Shara, Besita, who was at the side, was stunned, and her expression was even more complicated. Emotions such as shock, regret, and fear, along with some other emotions she could not make sense of, cycled through her face. That's enough. Leyland waved his hand with an indifferent direction, motioning for the old geezer to stop his kowtowing. I don't care for your matters. However, from today onwards, such petty conflicts must end. If anyone continues with it, causing our forces to dwindle and letting the enemy gain an advantage, I will draw the culprit's spirit from his or her body and torture it for 100 years. Are we all clear on this? Leyland knew deep down that such bullying traditions could not be avoided. Under normal circumstances, if it was not for the fact that he knew George and his group, he would not have given a hoot about the issue. However, with Leyland here now, not only would these acolytes stop bullying George and his party, they would even do their best to curry favor with them. As a result, he did not have much to say. Harvesting, all right, if there's nothing else, you are dismissed. Leyland looked at George, who appeared to have something to say but kept stopping himself, and then at Besita and the others who kept silent. He could feel his enthusiasm waning. Ever since he advanced to become an official Magus, he seemed to be in a different world compared to his original social circles. Even though his old acquaintances were right in front of him, they felt incredibly unfamiliar, as if hundreds of thousands of years had passed. Understood. The acolytes under him bowed and quickly retreated. Even George and Besida left the hall cautiously after bowing. Besida, who was the last to leave, gave Leyland an incomprehensible look and quickly withdrew. In the dark hours of the night, after completing one round of Kemian's pupil meditation technique, Leyland was lying in bed resting. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. Immediately after, a soft knocking came from outside. "Come in, the door's not locked." Leyland got up and spoke indifferently. The door creaked open, and a human figure dressed in a gray cloak walked in. "Besida, what can I do for you?" Leyland glanced at this girl with silvery white hair, his eyes giving off a mischievous aura. "Lord Leyland, please forgive Besida for her previous offenses." Besida's voice was mild and gentle as she spoke softly, following which she removed the cloak that she was wearing and revealed a stark naked body that was underneath it. Besida's body had matured from the time he had last seen her. Her body was extremely voluptuous and with exquisite snow-white skin. It seemed as if water would gush forward when the skin was pinched. Besida looked at Leyland as she slowly knelt down. In her ruby-red eyes, there seemed to be a fawning look earnestly seeking forgiveness. One might wonder about the feeling of having a beautiful and stunning girl kneeling in front of you, stark naked, for your forgiveness in the wee hours of the night. Right now, Leyland had experienced it for himself. However, his expression was serene, as if Besida's seductive and delicate body was but a broken skeleton in his eyes. Leyland looked over this intelligent, but also shrewd girl. "You are smart, but at times you're too smart for your own good." He raised his right hand and caressed Besida's face, and then trailed it down to her breasts. "You're trying to seduce me, just with these 2 lumps of flesh." Leyland's right hand wantonly rubbed at Besida's soft breasts. The girl moaned, her expression filled with pain. Besida suddenly felt an immense sense of dread attack her. Her might as a level 3 acolyte was nothing to Leyland. What she did have confidence in, however, was her striking beauty. However, looking at Leyland's icy gaze, she suddenly felt that all she had just done was shameless and laughable. Leyland's cold eyes left her feeling suffocated. Her body continuously trembled as cold sweat dripped down. With the passing of time, Besida's body became flushed and her face pale. It was as if she could die from the lack of air at any given moment. "However, rejoice. To commemorate the previous me, I have decided to give you a chance." Just as when Besida was about to faint, Leyland spoke softly. Only then did she recollect herself, and she panted heavily. Previously, it was as if a giant hand was choking her. The feeling of being suffocated disappeared when Leyland spoke. Besida took in the fresh air in large gulps with teardrops on the verge of flowing. There had never been a time where being able to breathe freely was something she considered a blessing. "Come with me." Leyland shook his head and opened the door to a partitioned room. Besida trembled and picked up her cloak, which was on the floor, and covered her delicate, naked body. She had been able to entice Leyland without feeling apprehensive, but now all she felt was shame. Such a strange feeling made her turn beet red, wishing there was a hole that would swallow her up. After going through the door to another room, Besida found that she had come to a secret room that was entirely sealed. It was a small room, and one could see traces of the bricks on the walls. In the middle of the secret room, there was a cumbersome metal desk that was similar to that of an experimentation table. Fixed on the 4 corners of the table were handcuffs and leg cuffs. Looking at this metal desk, Besida's face turned pale. She wanted to retreat, yet she did not dare to. Then she realized that oddities were hanging on chamber walls. For example, there was a short cudgel that was littered with small beads on its surface. There was also a large syringe filled with various glass pearls within, with a suction pad and handle and other strange add-ons. Besida's heart sank like a weighted rock. Of course, she was aware that many official magi had strange fetishes. She had even heard of a story where a professor in her academy ate a girl while she was still alive after having finished toying with her. "Don't misunderstand. This isn't mine, but a gift left behind by the previous Magus." Leyland fetched a unique binding instrumentation made with cotton and metal chains from the wall. "But I realized that his hobbies are quite similar to my own, in the past." Here, Leyland was naturally referring to that unfortunate idiot who had died and allowed Leyland to take over his body. Leyland didn't like Besida since she had been taking advantage of him before. Hence, he was planning to teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. The previous Leyland had suffered a great deal at the hands of others and had eventually died. Leyland believed that since he had taken over everything that belonged to the previous Leyland, it might be his duty to take revenge on his behalf. It wasn't anything that difficult anyway. These items here have been modified and are exactly what I liked. Leyland glanced at Besida, who was in front of him. A malicious smirk was on his face. After Leyland willfully vented his feelings, he seemed to be completely fine the next morning and handled matters in the fort. Besida, however, struggled as she emerged from the secret room the second night. Her face was completely pale, and her bones seemed to have no feeling in them. The scent of blood was strong on her, and Besida stayed in bed for a whole week before she could force herself to walk. If this had happened before, acolytes would have expressed their disapproval and complained. But now, even if Besida were to be absent for 7 days, they could only tolerate her behavior. After all, not every acolyte could have relations with an official Magus, right? She suffered repercussions after that incident, and every time she looked at Leyland, both her legs would involuntarily shake as if she had seen a devil. Of course, Leyland didn't care about that. Once he had used all the methods that he had gleaned from the previous Leyland's memories on Besida, he never approached her again. The reason for what he did to her wasn't because of some perverted desire or hobby. He simply wanted to punish her and take revenge for the original Leyland Farlier. Hence, after heartily venting his anger, all matters regarding Besida had been forgotten. Leyland was currently patrolling the sea of black mandara flowers. These black flowers had petals that were the size of a palm. Atop were blue spots that were like stars, and in the night they would even give off milky white rays of light. The black mandara flower was a subdivision of the mandara flower. Their petals were an extremely precious resource for acolytes and even official magi who specialized in negative energy. In the external world, a black mandara flower petal could sell for a staggering price of over 1,000 magic crystals. And here, what Leyland had in front of him was a whole sea of these flowers. The resources in the eternal river plains, secret plain, are so bountiful that it makes one's hair stand erect. Leyland exclaimed even though it was not the first time he had seen them. A pity that above this sea of black mandara flowers there was a surveillance spell. Before he decided to turn his back on the light magi, he had to temporarily restrain any notions of seizing the flowers for himself. In addition to the surveillance spell, there were intricate probing spell formations at every entrance to the secret plane. The question of how to secretly transport these resources out was a very troublesome problem. Now he could understand why the Four Seasons Garden wanted to erect a fort in this area. Occupying a strategic location was just one aspect, but Four Seasons Garden could also not give up this huge sea of flowers. Although the Eternal River Plains, Secret Plain, was extremely vast and had bountiful resources, this sea of black mandara flowers was extremely valuable even amongst the other resources in here. If not for this terrible location, the Four Seasons Garden may have most likely sent a large army to defend this area. Lord, our task every day is to try harvest as many of these black mandara flowers and transport them away before the enemy arrives. Beside the sea of flowers, an acolyte trailed behind Leyland and explained the concrete details. Enia rings bless us. As those damn dark magi discovered several large-scale resource areas, skirmishes arose as a result. We will most likely be facing a large amount of dark magi forces. There are still some dark magi and acolytes who try to break through the defenses every once in a while to steal the resources. Furthermore, we also have to guard against certain light magi. This acolyte smiled wryly. I understand. Anyway, our mission is to harvest all these flowers as soon as we can and fend off wandering magi and acolytes. If we are in a situation of distress, we have to send a signal. Is that right? Leyland asked indifferently. Yes, that's about it. The acolyte's smile turned even more bitter. Such a tactic was plainly inviting Leyland and his party to dance at the edges of a sword and use their lives in exchange for resources. I got it, Leyland spoke solemnly after a moment of silence. Conflict with Seal, Leyland looked over the immeasurable number of black flowers in the distance as he calculated their progress. As long as all these black mandara flowers were harvested, the headquarters wouldn't have any reason to prevent him and the others from leaving. All the acolytes that Leyland had previously met were currently in the sea of flowers, carrying simple containers made from green vines. Their hands were covered with rings of dark energy particles as they plucked the black mandara flowers with great care. This progress is too slow. With this kind of harvesting speed, Leyland estimated that it would take at least another month before this field of flowers would be completely harvested. The opposing dark magi would never give them so much time. I must find a way to speed up the process. Leyland squatted on the ground. With his hands covered by the dark light of a magic spell, he touched the petals of the black mandara flowers, a light flashing in his blue eyes. Ding-ling-ling. Suddenly, a series of shrill sounds like those of a small bell rang. Buzz-buzz. A barrier of white light was emitted to tightly surround the field of black mandara flowers. The defensive spell formation has been activated. There's an intruder. An acolyte started to yell. Everyone beware. Whoosh. Suddenly, a dark silhouette darted out from the high grass surrounding the field of flowers. Crack, crack. Two huge white skulls emerged from the hands of the black silhouette. The skulls didn't have bodies attached to them and floated in the air spookily. Inside each of the skull's eye sockets was a red ball of continuously burning flames. These huge skulls opened their jaws, revealing fine, sharp white teeth as they bit into the white light barrier. Boom, boom, boom. The white light of the barrier was blinking constantly, as if it would break at any moment. Oh! The black silhouette exclaimed in surprise, seemingly unsatisfied with his own performance. Following which, a black aura consisting of energy particles appeared around his body. Suddenly, the black energy aura emitted a serene light, which turned into two streaks of light as they hit the skulls. Crack, crack, crack. Red fire within the skull's eye sockets suddenly expanded, and the structure of the skulls expanded considerably. Cracks even appeared on the surface of the skull. It seemed that the energies inside were expanding too rapidly, and the skulls were on the verge of bursting. Following this transformation, the offensive power of these two skulls increased. The white light barrier kept shrinking, and in the end, it finally broke in front of the crestfallen acolytes. A semi-converted elemental Magus, we are finished. A more experienced acolyte collapsed to the ground with an expression filled with despair. Fear not, Lord Leyland is also an official Magus. George held the small hand of the trembling Shiera. What would you know? The previous acolyte, who had collapsed to the ground, yelled in despair. Our side only has this newly advanced and outcasted Magus. On the other hand, our opponent is a powerhouse who has been an official Magus for dozens of years. Being a semi-converted elemental Magus, all his spells are stronger by at least half. At this stage, he's simply invincible as compared to those newly advanced magi. Believing that his end was nearing, this acolyte didn't care anymore. He even started to be disrespectful towards Leyland. Hee. A very interesting explanation, but quite accurate nonetheless. The black silhouette walked unhurriedly towards the flower field and revealed himself to Leyland and the rest. He was a young green-haired Magus. He was dressed in a strange black robe, which had a few green skulls and chains embroidered on it. He's from Kurut Academy, which is known for its methods of torture and in use of the spirits of the dead. Leyland's eyes flashed as he recognized this Magus in front of them. This Kurut Academy was only a tiny faction within the Dark Magi of the South Coast. They produced plenty of lunatics and mentally unsound people. Even the other Dark Magi could not stomach their actions, and hence they only partook in sporadic missions and were often excluded from various operations. The green-haired Magus clasped his hands behind his back and greedily looked over the sea of black mandara flowers. What an enchanting atmosphere! I can detect the taste of darkness, the youth muttered. Following which, he turned and stared at Leyland with his dark green eyes. Light Magi, kneel before me, the great Lord Seal, and offer to me your souls and devotion. Then I might consider letting you be my slaves. This Magus named Seal had a rather proud demeanor, but Leyland could understand why. The age of a Magus couldn't be determined just by looking at their physical appearance, but Leyland could estimate that this seal was around 50 years old based on the energy waves he was unknowingly releasing. His being able to become a semi-converted elemental Magus at such a young age did indeed give him the rights to be proud, but he had met the wrong opponent. Leyland smirked, but before he even had the chance to speak, the acolyte that sunk to the ground previously had already hastened towards Seal, kneeling and kissing the ground before Seal. Esteemed Lord Seal, I am willing to serve you. I will become your most loyal slave. It was clear that the actions of this acolyte was a complete surprise to everyone. Next to Leyland, plenty of acolytes carried expressions of scorn. They clearly didn't know that this acolyte who normally carried himself rather decently would turn into this kind of person at a crucial moment. The other acolytes were able to conceal the internal struggle within them, such that it did not show on their faces. "Very good. I'll accept you as a servant." Seal revealed a strange smile on his face as he proceeded to extend his left hand and gently wipe the face of the acolyte. "Ah!" White smoke rose, accompanied by the pained scream of the acolyte. Seal's left hand was like a red-hot iron plate as it left a large black charred mark on the face of the acolyte. While the acolyte was screaming, the Magus looked extremely excited as he slid his fingers over the acolyte's face repeatedly. A little over 10 seconds later, a complete rune mark was burned into the face of the acolyte. The front of the mark resembled a skull, with a chain extending from within. Thank you, my lord, for this gift." The acolyte struggled to salute once more. "Ha! After receiving my mark, you are now my slave forever." Seal laughed, then looked over at Leyland. "What is it? Light Magus, are you scared silly?" "Not really." Leyland shook his head. "I just think he's a bit pitiful, that's all." Leyland pointed towards the acolyte who had half his face ruined, his facial muscles still twitching. "Why is that?" Seal rubbed his fingers as slivers of white gas emerged from his fingers to form the shape of a skull. The elemental particles surrounding his body was faintly discernible as his eyes emitted a dangerous light. "Blurg!" The acolytes behind Leyland all fell back, and some of them even doubled over and started to hurl. The radiation from an official Magus, especially when voluntarily released from a powerful Magus with such a high degree of elemental conversion, was something that acolytes found hard to deal with. Will he be all right?" George was supporting Shiera as he retreated quite a distance. He then glanced worriedly at Leyland, who had remained behind. "Relax, Lord Leyland is very powerful." As Shiera recovered, she also started to comfort her lover. Even though she had previously seen Leyland in action, she couldn't quite understand how powerful he actually was. She only said those things to comfort George. "It's just that. Leyland is still newly advanced, I'm afraid that." George held Shiera's hand tightly. Judging from how Seal acted had before, one could tell he was probably crazy. If Leyland lost, then these acolytes would probably end up for the worse. Shiera could only smile bitterly as she secretly prayed for Leyland. "He'll have to pay the price because he swore his loyalty to the wrong person." Leyland spoke indifferently as if he hadn't even noticed Seal's previous magic display. "What? You're planning to?" Seal raised his eyebrows. He couldn't understand. From the reports, it was said that this was a newly advanced Magus who was a mere potion master. How dare he ignore him? Seal pointed at Leyland. It was as if the large skull had received a command, and it charged towards Leyland, simultaneously spewing forth dark green flames. Bang! Leyland steeled himself for the attack with a nonchalant expression and charged forth. "Is he crazy?" Before Seal could finish his sentence, Leyland uttered a single-syllabled word. Immediately, a dark red light erupted forth from within Leyland's body. The falling star pendant's defense activated immediately and formed a dark red barrier around Leyland. As the light condensed, it turned into something that resembled an illusionary armor. Boom! Dark green flames exploded on Leyland's body, though no harm was caused. Leyland advanced, bathed in fire like the incarnation of an ancient fiery war god. He swung his right fist viciously. Bam! The large skull was blown away, leaving a trace of fine bone dust as it spun through the air. Pow! After being sent upside down over a distance, the white skull finally broke apart. "You!" Seal was attempting to speak as he pointed towards Leyland, but it was too late now. Leyland kept his face blank and charged in front of Seal. He suddenly slashed with his hand, the red light around his hands extending and forming a crimson longsword. Slash! The long sword broke through the air and appeared in front of Seal's chest. "Arg!" The muscles on Seal's face contorted, and just as the sword was about to pierce his body, numerous green chains emerged from within his body to form chainmail. Optimized and easy, the red blade collided with the green chains, causing an intense wave of force. Crack! Crack! The long red blade shattered into pieces and a part of the chain mail armor on Seal's chest broke off. Several green rings had been chopped in half and fallen to the ground. You're not any normal Magus who has just advanced." Seal retreated, his expression showing his regret. Leyland was indifferent as he charged at him. Wait a minute, we can discuss this. I still have many." "Arg!" Although Seal wanted to say more, Leyland did not give him the chance to do so. He pursued Seal and struck again, black scales covering his clenched fist and emitting a glossy black luster. The first punch, Seal's chest was caved in, and countless green iron rings were shattered. The second punch, Seal's innate defense spell, was utterly destroyed. He retreated with his chest caved in and blood dripping from the corner of his lips. "Do you have any last words?" Leyland expressionlessly approached him. "My mentor will seek revenge for me," Seal incessantly said like a broken record. "Boring." Leyland prepared his third attack. Boom. Seal's brain exploded like a watermelon, white and red liquids mixing together and spreading all over the ground. The acolyte who had had his face branded was on the floor, staring blankly at the headless corpse that no longer had any life within it. He didn't even have the presence of mind to wipe off the blood that had splashed on his face. I. George gaped and shook Shiera's arm. Was that person really a mighty semi-converted Magus? Are you sure he wasn't an acolyte? Definitely, just a glare from him could kill us. Shiera forced a laugh. Then, what kind of power must Lord Leyland have to have been able to defeat and even kill him? George watched Leyland, who was poking around Seal's corpse with a complicated expression on his face. Lo, Lord. Only then, the acolyte standing at the side came to his senses. Just then, there was an arrogant, semi-converted Magus. How did he just die like that at Lord Leyland's hands? Now, how do we handle the matter of Leihart's desertion? The deserter acolyte sat mindlessly on the floor like a fool as he unconsciously repeated nonsense. The secret imprint that Seal had left on him was extremely eye-catching. There should be an established punishment by the Alliance to punish all deserters, right? Do you actually need me to teach you that? Leyland shot a glance at the acolyte. Although it was just a glance, the acolyte immediately retreated several steps, and even his calves turned wobbly. No, my lord." This newly turned traitor was tied up by a few others and sent to the fort. The acolytes present all displayed terror and dread on their faces. "Leihart's finished," an acolyte murmured. As per the rules and regulations set by the Light Magi Alliance, all acolytes and magi who defected to the enemy's side received the worst punishments. Leihart had betrayed them so blatantly in front of Leyland and the many acolytes, and he even had a secret imprint from the opposing Magus. This was irrefutable evidence. In this situation, death was the easiest way out. If he had the misfortune to meet a strict judge, at the very least, his spirit would be extracted and tortured for 100 years. His family and mentor would also have to face some calamities. "Why are you so distracted? Get to work. Do you want to stay here all day?" Leyland looked over at the stunned acolytes and exclaimed icily. "Ah, yes, my lord." Only then did the acolytes respond and continue with their harvesting. Not even George and Shiera were spared. If they did not finish harvesting this patch of black mandara flowers, they would not be allowed to return to the Magus base camp. No matter how powerful Leyland was, he would eventually be pressured by the dark Magus forces. It might not even take that long. If the enemy was less stressed and decided to focus 0.1% or even 0.01% of their attention on this place, they would be doomed. Hence, the acolytes worked diligently, hoping they would complete their mission today and leave this damned place. "Restore!" At the other end, Leyland was in the middle of the sea of flowers. He drew the black scepter, muttering a single word. Wang! A ring of whiteness spread from the scepter and like a thin thread seeped into the ground. At the same time, from the bottom of the flowers, the white spell formation appeared once again. White threads that looked like spiderwebs surged, restoring the areas that had been destroyed by the Dark Magus. Jail Defense Formation, second form. Defense against physical attacks, 20 degrees. Resistance against magical attacks. Energy in store, 34.9%. A screen appeared in front of Leyland's eyes, presenting him with information about the spell formation. With the help of the AI chip, the restoration works were very successful. A few areas that had been damaged were perfectly repaired by the AI chip simulating, and Leyland physically fixing them. But the defensive capabilities of this formation are much too weak. Leyland stroked his chin, wondering if he should modify this spell formation to increase its defense. As the Magus who stood guard here, Leyland was able to gain a portion of the black mandara flowers. The ratio was so miserable that he cared little for it. However, the rate at which the acolytes completed their task was directly related to how soon he would be able to leave. If there were attacks every day, how would the acolytes harvest the petals? Hence, Leyland's first priority was to ensure the safety of the acolytes so they could finish the task as quick as possible. "I should just wait until it's late at night and finish it myself." Leyland looked at the acolytes who were bending their backs and working like farmers. a gloomy look in his eyes. It wasn't that he didn't trust the acolytes, but he was used to having some trump cards. He could also come up with methods to increase the rate of harvesting. As long as he increased the rate at which the AI chip operated and prioritized this task, it would take but a few days. It was highly possible that by that time, the acolytes would be able to work quicker. In the blink of an eye, about half a month had passed. In Eternal River Plains, Secret Plain, the round disk in the sky began to descend, leaving a shadow on the ground. The Magi organization that had constructed this secret plane had used some sort of spell and structured it so that there was a sun, moon, and different seasons. However, based on Leyland's hypothesis and the AI chip's calculations, the sun and moon inside the plane had a hint of the energy of the original celestial bodies, which those ancient Magi were able to project into the secret plane using an unknown method. Leyland was in awe of the ancient Magi's methods and boldness. In Teljo City, the humans had made use of the volcano to allow increased production in its vicinity through the use of a spell, and just this had left Leyland agape. However, compared to the ancient Magi who could take the stars, embrace the moon, cause storms with one wave of their hands, and cast rain with another wave of their hands, Leyland had to bow down in inferiority. Not only is Lord Leyland a mighty Magus, he actually specializes in the study of plants. In the Sea of Flowers, 2 acolytes who were nearest to him were in conversation while their hands were busy. That's a given. After all, he is an official Magus. It's not something we acolytes can compare to. The male acolyte who had just spoken had short red hair. At this moment, there was a layer of blue light coating his hands. After rubbing his fingers, several strands of blue thread coiled itself around the black mandara flowers. Ka-cha, ka-cha, the sound of a flower being cut was heard, following which the petals of that black mandara flower floated down slowly from its stem and was kept safely by the acolyte, who placed it inside a bag. Previously, every petal required a large consumption of magic power and spiritual force to acquire. Even Crawl, who was the best amongst us, could only pluck 20 petal pieces in a day. However, ever since Lord Leyland imparted a new method to us, even I can harvest over 40 petals in a single day. The red-haired acolyte had a look of admiration. With this kind of speed, as long as we endure for a couple more days, we will be able to leave this damned place. The other acolyte who spoke revealed an obvious hint of longing. I don't wish to stay for another day in this place. With so many dark Magi and acolytes coming to attack us each day, we would have died over 100 times if not for Lord Leyland here. Boom. At this moment, the alert from the defense spell formation had sounded. However, these 2 acolytes seemed to have not heard it at all, as they continued to diligently harvest the petals. Say, who do you think is the unfortunate one today? The red-haired acolyte asked with some schadenfreude. It should be another official Magus. Regular acolytes do not have such large energy wave fluctuations. The other acolyte creased his brows before stooping down again to pluck more petals. Anyways, with Lord Leyland around, what's there to fear? You're right. The red-haired acolyte nodded his head and began his day's chores. At this moment, within the castle's walls, in a gloomy, moist, and dark underground prison cell devoid of light, Leyland strode forward, carrying a black-clothed figure on his arms. Crash! The cell gate was opened, and Leyland tossed the person he carried into the cell without a care. Bang! As flesh and the hard floor made contact, there was a loud thudding noise. The person who was previously unconscious was now awake. 210 handover, you dare imprison me. I swear on my name, Jocelyn Lena, that I definitely won't let you off. This Magus, who was called Jocelyn Lena, donned a black robe. Her hair was curly, and her eyeliner makeup was extremely thick. Dark circles were prominent under her eyes, making it look as if she had not slept in days. She had numerous bizarre silver piercings on her skin, and she also had a few earrings. The general impression that she gave was that she was a non-mainstream teenage girl who had taken a wrong step in life. Jocelyn, yes! Leyland stood by the door, snapping his fingers. Immediately after, the metal door seemed to have developed a life of its own and automatically closed. Meanwhile, metal chains climbed and locked the cage, and then branded the symbol of a black snake onto the entrance of it. I don't care who you are. As you are a dark Magus attacking us to pilfer the Four Seasons Garden's resources, I hereby arrest you on the account of attempted robbery. Someone will take you away soon. Once you are at the Light Magi's headquarters, I imagine you'll have to start thinking of ways to escape your fate of being burned at the stake." Leyland said expressionlessly, and then commanded a nearby acolyte, "I've temporarily suppressed their abilities, so watch them well till the defense squad takes over." "Yes, my lord." The acolyte bowed deeply. In these past few days, Leyland had given a little demonstration of his power, and that had been enough to instill fear into these acolytes. All the dark magi who had come to provoke them were easily taken care of by Leyland within a few rounds, whether they were acolytes or official magi. Just the number of magi taken captive was enough to fill the fort's jail to the seams. Leyland had no choice but to notify the defense squad. They worked out a schedule where they would take the prisoners away every few days. This power isn't something that an ordinary Magus could even hope for. This Lord Leyland must be some amazing, important person. The acolyte roared madly in his heart as he lowered his head. Leyland cared little about this acolyte's mental activities, and he cared even less about the female prisoner Magus, who was cursing hysterically. He shook his head and left the underground dungeon. "Just wait. My uncle absolutely won't let you off." From within the dungeon, Jocelyn was hatefully saying, "My uncle became a semi-converted Magus 20 years ago and entered the secret plane with me. The moment he finds out what happened to me, he'll definitely come save me. When that happens, That's enough, Jocelyn. Can you be quiet?" A helpless voice that held a hint of bitterness sounded from the opposite jail cell. A curly-haired middle-aged man appeared from the shadows and awkwardly greeted Jocelyn. Uncle Luge, why are you here?" Jocelyn covered her mouth, completely stunned. "I was actually captured and brought here 3 days ago." The curly-haired man called Luge forced a smile. "The Magus guard in charge of this fortress, Leyland, seems to have reached the peak of a rank 1 Magus. I felt the terrifying undulations that could only belong to magi who have reached the top." Jocelyn was stunned. The sole person she was counting on had long since been captured, and thinking back to how she had been cursing incessantly, she had looked as foolish as a clown. "These are the black mandara flower's petals that we gathered today. They have had spells cast on them to ensure their freshness for at least 15 days. Leyland pointed at a pile of materials that had been piled neatly to the side, and then at a few magi who were in black robes and had their hands and legs cuffed. "These are the dark magi caught recently. Take them away as well." "Yes, my lord." The one taking the petals and dark magi for Leyland was also an official Magus who was followed by a few team members of the same rank. In front of Leyland, however, he could not help but lower his body and spoke with honorifics. In the Magus world, whether one was a light or dark Magus, the basic principle was that power was everything. The team leader was only a semi-converted Magus, and Leyland had passed several dark magi of that strength to him. In battle, taking an official Magus captive was obviously much more difficult than simply defeating or killing them. Hence, after being made aware of Leyland's abilities, the team leader was unable to treat Leyland condescendingly and looked like he was meeting his boss every time he came. "HM, 3 are official magi, of which 1 is female, and 13 are acolytes." This female Magus was naturally Jocelyn, whose complexion was deadly pale as if she had been dealt a serious blow, and did not dare to provoke Leyland. The team leader quickly recorded this information down and signed his name on a form. Afterwards, he couldn't help but greeting him using Magus etiquette. "Lord Leyland, your accomplishments in the field have far surpassed mine. Once we return to the main headquarters, your rewards and contribution points will be given to you all at once." As it was basically a war in the secret plane, the prisoners that Leyland had taken captive could be turned into merit points. Not only could merit points be used to exchange for special items that could only be found within the Eternal River Plains, secret plane from the large light magi organizations, it could also be used to obtain unique items from other academies. This included advanced knowledge, improved spell formations, precious potions, and the like. "All right," Leyland nodded. Based on his estimations, if the merit points he had gained could be converted into magic crystals, he would have leased several million. This meant that soon, he could leave this place behind. As a better method for harvesting had been provided, about half of the black mandara flowers had been picked, and only a relatively small amount was left. At the rate they were working at, the black mandara flowers would be completely harvested in less than 4 days. And at that time, Leyland and the others would be able to leave this damned place. Every time he saw the defense squad coming in fully armed, Leyland was filled with annoyance. As the goods that were to be transported were of extreme importance, The means of transportation provided to the transportation team was the toucan. This type of bird had a large body and, when matured, could grow up to 10 meters tall. Its beak drooped downwards, forming a large space that was basically a room that could store many items and even humans. The team leader split up his team evenly and directed them into the beaks of 3 toucans, leaving the best spot for himself. On top of the box full of black mandara flower petals, he began to rest. At the thought that he was sleeping on top of several million magic crystals, his heart began to burn involuntarily. If not for the almost abnormal strictness that the Light Magi Alliance had at the entrance checks, and the fact that it was impossible to smuggle things out, even he might have harbored some terrible thoughts. It was warm in the toucan's beak, and even when it was flying high in the sky, not a current of air came through. It was very comfortable, and as the team leader shut his eyes, he began to fall asleep. Crash! All of a sudden, the surroundings rocked and several boxes were overturned and fell to the ground. "What's happening?" he exclaimed in shock. Immediately after, a secret imprint by his ear brightened. "Leader, it's an enemy attack, it's the Dark Magi." The voice of his subordinate traveled from the imprint, and he sounded fearful. "Those wretched things," he cursed and shouted through his secret imprint. "Prepare for landing, all members get ready for war." Boom. Large amounts of cold wind flowed in, and the boxes filled with black mandara flower petals were 23, 32 strewn across the floor. Before he had finished speaking, an intense explosion sounded, followed by squawks of pain from the toucan he was riding in. Flames swept through in a horizontal line, burning through the toucan's tough beak and revealing the blue sky. Whoosh! Large amounts of cold wind flowed in, and the boxes filled with black mandara flower petals were strewn across the floor. "Despicable, land quickly," the team leader hurriedly yelled. If he lost these resources, all the blame would be placed on him. How could he not be anxious? The toucan was calling weakly. Finally, as if the flying toucan could no longer take on any more attacks, its entire body lost balance and fell from the sky like a rock. Rumble. The toucan's huge body smashed into some shrubbery and left a deep indent on the ground. Various little animals revealed themselves and quickly escaped in the opposite direction. "Pa! Pewee! Pewee!" Covered in dirt and grime, the team leader emerged from the toucan's beak and attempted to spit out the grass and leaves in his mouth. "I swear I will learn a flight spell when I go back this time," the leader vowed vehemently. It honestly felt terrible to be hurtled through the air. "Unfortunately, you won't be getting the chance to do that." An ominous voice sounded, and several people in dark Magus attire with green light shining in their eyes surrounded him. "Oh my, it seems I'm quite popular, eh?" Looking at this scene, the team leader looked to be extremely dumbfounded and just stared blankly at the opposing the Dark Magi. "Woofter magic arrows!" A shrewd light flashed in the leader's eyes, and his clothes exploded, countless fine needles flying towards the surrounding Magi. "Go!" He howled, and streams of lights and shadows flashed, rushing out in all directions to break out of the circle of people around him. At this moment, he could clearly the state around him. The toucans, which served as a mode of transportation, had all been brought down and were being surrounded by numerous dark magi.